Rebecca, would you mind getting the lights for the...
I'll do that.
Okay.
We have to sign this plan.
Right, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. The board is returning from a brief recess. The next item on our agenda is a presentation from the Water Quality Management Committee regarding betterment allocation. Mr. Chair, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Virginia Valiela, Precinct 5. I'm the Vice Chair of the Water Quality Management Committee. With me is Eric Turkington, who is the Chair. Ron Zweig, member of the committee, is also here, Jerry Patamas. And we are reporting to you on your request in January to develop information regarding betterments. And we have assembled both historical and financial information. We have looked at a wide range of issues related to betterments, and we hope to provide that information to you and the public tonight. So starting with the next slide. A brief review as to why we're here tonight and why we're talking about betterments. You will remember that Falmouth has been studying the estuary since 2010, actually 2007, and that we have arrived at a consensus in the community that we will sewer as little as possible. We will pursue demonstration projects and alternatives and monitor them rigorously. We will incorporate non-traditional technologies as they become available through a process that's called adaptive management. We need to make necessary upgrades to the wastewater treatment plant, and all of these projects will be funded without a levy increase. We are issuing new debt to replace old debt. Next slide. Our recent accomplishments are in 2011, passage of Article 17, which funded the study of all of these alternatives, and looking at the Little Pond sewer area. That was passed in all precincts on the ballot by a 2-to-1 margin. In 2012, we had approval of our draft comprehensive wastewater management plan by the selectmen, followed by the state. In 2013, we passed a bond issue for the design for the lower Little Pond collection area, and also design money for Bournes Pond inlet widening and several other infrastructure projects. That was also approved at the ballot by a 58-to-42 margin. Just this last November, we passed several things at town meeting, all of which are related to the sewering project and the estuaries. We have a flow neutral bylaw for the service area, which says that the total water usage going forward will be no greater than the amount that is there now. We have a special act in the legislature now, which has passed the Senate and is in third reading in the House, that will, in a variety of ways, reduce costs to property owners should you decide to assess a betterment. And we have also filed a special legislation for an eco-toilet exemption so that anyone within a sewer service area who installs eco-toilets throughout the house would not have to connect to the sewer. And lastly, we received a significant stamp of approval from the state that our plan was adequate, which is the word they use, just this past January. Next slide. This is what is in our approved plan. Nitrogen control bylaw, which is already passed and in effect. Shellfish aquaculture, already being explored in Little Pond. Permeable reactive barriers are under study. Bournes Pond inlet widening has had preliminary design, and we're now ready to begin to look at specific design. Denitrifying septic systems is an ongoing project. It's another way to handle nitrogen on site. Eco-toilets I've spoken about. Adaptive management is the concept, and the Little Pond sewering. Next slide. This is simply a visual of where we've come since 2009. The original plan was $600 million and a vast amount of sewering south of 28. Second plan under study by a working group in 2010 was a $320 million, and what we are talking about now is what's inside this white circle, $41 million for the Little Pond sewer service area. That area is the watershed contribution to Little Pond. Next. All right. Some people still wonder, well, why Little Pond? So just to remind everyone, this is the town's most degraded estuary, and it is in the most densely populated part of town. Very small lots, 5,000 feet or less. It was identified as an area back in 2001, 2007, as an area of failed septic systems and in need of correction. The program that studied all the estuaries is called the Massachusetts Estuaries Project, MEP, shows that we need to remove 100% of the controllable nitrogen from the lower watershed. It's currently, our concentration in that pond at what's called the Sentinel Station is 80.84 milligrams per liter. We need to get down to 0.45 milligrams per liter. Next. The benefits we feel to the town are no fish kills and odor, improved habitat for fish and shellfish, better recreation, and increased property values. The benefits to the homeowner are not to have to deal with chronic maintenance of septic systems. You are now able to expand a home up to 4 bedrooms by right. That is allowed in the flow neutral bylaw. And as a consequence, you have increased property values, or you can build a garage, which you were never able to build because there was no space. All right, here we go with the sewer service area itself. It's shown as a red line on the map on the right, and for the audience, we've put up a map as well. The map that can be seen by the audience, the orange are properties that are already on the existing sewer system. This sewer service area now abuts that, includes Falmouth Heights on the east side, and includes Mara Vista Peninsula all the way up to Stars Street, and then all the way up to the T-Ticket School. There are approximately 1,450 parcels. That's a pretty good number, give or take a few. Of those parcels, using assessor's records, we've determined that 1,274 are single-family homes. This is an overly residential sewer service area. Of those family homes, 66%, 2/3, are second homes or rentals, and only 1/3 are actually owner-occupied. This is a statistic we had not expected. So it is heavily second homes and rental. 433 we believe is the count of owner-occupied principal residences. We looked at costs in 2 ways. What are the costs that the homeowner is incurring now or would incur if going on the sewer, and then what are the costs for the betterment, which was your question to us. So this summarizes all the annualized costs that are not betterment related. On a normal schedule, a property would pump out every 3 years, annualized to $100 a year, and would need a new leach field every 20 years, and that is a cost of $10,000. These numbers come from local contractors who do business and do this kind of work. The new leach field would be $800, so giving you an annualized, what we call a voided cost now, of $900 compared to what we're going to now compare to the sewer costs. With the sewer cost, you're going to have a one-time hookup. There is a county program that will help you spread those costs. We'll talk about that in just a minute. But annualized, it's $200 to $325 a year. We know that some of the properties will be on low-pressure grinder pumps and not on gravity sewer. It just depends on where you happen to be in relation to the main gravity mains that collect the wastewater. So we included an electricity cost, and we figured out how much the grinder pump would use, and that's $25 a year. We know the water flow of all of the properties in this area from the department, the DPW records. And so the sewer charges are directly piggybacked onto your water bill. So it is your water bill, and it costs $6.10 for every 750 gallons. So taking that average 100, usually it's 100, taking that average water usage, we found that the sewer charge would be $300 a year. Adding up all those costs, you can see that the annualized sewer costs are less than the annualized avoided costs, assuming one is setting aside funding for these expenses for the leach field and the pump out. Next slide. We know there is a concern, there's always a concern about new costs and homeowners and senior citizens in our community. And so we have tried very hard to identify programs that would help them with this sewer program as it gets underway. We've found 3 programs for sure, and we're still working. We may have more by town meeting to report. The first is that there's a long-standing county program for septic systems and septic failures. And it will also fund hookup costs to the sewer, because that's one way to solve your septic problem. That can be paid over 20 years, and on the previous slide, we showed you what the cost was. There is a senior circuit breaker property tax credit that is in existence, it's a standing program, for residents over 65, and it allows a payment back to you if your property taxes plus your betterment plus half of your water bill plus half of your sewer bill, if all those things together exceed 10% of your annual income. There is a certain limit of income, but it's relatively high. It's around $60,000 a year. So this is a program that is perhaps less well known. I did talk with Jill Bishop. She was aware of it and would be happy to have a workshop so that we could make people more aware of it. It is available to anybody now, and it clearly is available when the sewer goes through. And then lastly, through the assessor's department, you can defer all of the betterment payments if you are over 65 and have an income of total receipts less than $40,000. And again, there are a few other limitations. So we've looked for safety nets for our elderly and people on limited incomes. Next slide. Some people don't know what a betterment is, so we thought that we should at least define that. And these next 6 slides deal specifically with the betterment. You had a betterment for roads hearing this evening. And so water, roads, and sewer, under Massachusetts general laws, are in the town or city or is entitled to collect and back some of the costs of the particular project. Initially, the town pays for the full construction, and then some percentage, or not, is recovered through a betterment, which becomes a lien on the property, and you see it in your tax bill. You can pay it over a period of time, or you can pay it all at once. If there is a sale of the property, then at that time, usually the balance is paid, although I understand sometimes lenders allow the payments to continue. But in any case, that's sort of the basic law about betterments. Next. We're discussing betterments right now because we've had approval from the state of our comprehensive wastewater management plan. In the April town meeting, we are asking now for the construction dollars for this project. The design dollars were approved a year ago. These are the construction dollars. We are under full design, and we will be filing that design with the state by October 15th. So now is the time to inform the residents of the sewer service area what the costs are that they may incur for betterments. We feel that that's a fair and logical thing to do, and we again emphasize that this construction project is not raising the tax levy, it's new debt replacing old debt. We looked at the history of what the town meeting has done in the past and the voters, and we found that in 1981, which was the last time that we did a really big sewer project, Falmouth had a number of state and federal grants and ultimately decided the property owner should pay 45% and the town 55%. In 1997, New Silver Beach, which was totally residential, the initial decision by town meeting was that the property owner would pick up the entire cost, and the town would front-end the money, but then be paid back. Because of many legal suits, the cost escalated over time, and so town meeting reconsidered this issue in 2006 and finally settled on a split of 70% to the property owner and 30% to the town. So there's no set pattern to decisions the town has made so far on betterments. In giving you the options that we're about to present, we wanted to be very clear about the assumptions that we used to arrive at these numbers. We are assuming that this town will receive a 0% state revolving fund. That allows, well, it's basically no interest. We put the bonds out for construction, but we're not paying interest. We're assuming that the legislature has passed the special act that I discussed earlier, that's now in third reading, and that the selectmen will use the tools that are in that act, which allow the selectmen to pass through the 0% interest. Under current law, you couldn't do that. It will allow you to assess the betterment over 30 years. Under current law, you have to do it under 20 years. And it will allow you to assess level betterments and that they are paid with a quarterly tax bill. Neither of those provisions is under current betterment law. So this makes it easier for the homeowner to manage reliably predict his costs. The betterments need to be calculated on the basis of sewer equivalent units. If the sewer service area were entirely residential, like New Silver Beach, the math would be easy. Total cost divided by total number of properties equals sewer equivalent unit, and that's the dollar amount you end up as the potential whole amount to be paid back. But this sewer service area is only 88% residential. It has duplexes, condos, restaurants, motel, and many other commercial buildings. So you need to use, through Mass General laws, a tool which is called sewer equivalent units. And this is what the sewer commissioners used in 1984 when they were faced with the same issue. They were sewering Main Street, Surf Drive, Gardner Road, and Woods Hole, so it was a mixture of residential and commercial, and they had to try and balance it out. Somebody who has 3 condos uses a lot more water than one house, and so if you have 3 condos, you are 3 sewer units. Duplex is 2 sewer units. If you have a restaurant with so many seats, then 10 seats becomes a sewer equivalent unit. So using that policy, we did the math. So here are the 3 main components to calculating the betterment. You need to know the total capital cost of the construction. That's $41 million. That's in the report. That's the entire collection system, including the pumping stations, and the design, and the permitting for the Lower Pond sewer service area. We know we have 1,600 sewer equivalent units. We went through the assessor's record, looked at every duplex, condo, restaurant, and so on. And then ultimately, you need to decide the percentage, which is what the selectmen are going to do. So here we have the math. 41 million capital cost divided by 1,600 sewer equivalent units equals 25,625 sewer equivalent units if each homeowner were to pay the whole thing. That's 100% betterment. Next slide. We're going to give you a number of choices, and we're going to talk about them. First, let's do the bookend. A 0% betterment means everything is paid through the tax rate. There is no betterment, and there is no funding recovered over time. The other end, the other bookend, is 100%, where each sewer equivalent unit, which would be each home, and then if you're a duplex, times 2, and so on, would pay $25,625. And then we've given you 2 tables. One, if it's paid over 30 years, which is the special act, which is what we believe we should be working towards, or if you pay it over 20 years, which is the existing legislation. And in the far corner, far column, is the total amount that the town would recover. So ultimately, we would get 41 million back on the construction costs. We believe that the conversation needs to be more in the middle. We have given you 25%, 50%, and then we didn't do 75%, we did 70. And that's because this is what New Silver Beach paid. So being consistent with the most recent decision on betterments, we calculated the numbers at 70%. You obviously could do anything. You could do 40, 60, I mean, you could pick any percent you wanted. But we wanted to sort of help focus the discussion on what the cost would be, and ultimately a judgment by the selectmen and town meeting as to what seems like a reasonable and fair cost. And so it seems that's why we've highlighted the 50 and the 70% at 30 years. When you think about the existing costs that they will be paying, the one-time hookup, and then the sewer costs on an annual basis, it seems that somewhere in here could be a reasonable betterment. That is your decision, and we have tried to provide you with the tools for that conversation. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Questions for the committee?
Yeah,
Rebecca, could you get the lights?
Sure.
Thank you.
I don't have a question, but I want to say that's a tremendous amount of work that you did. And I don't know whose idea it was to ask you to come up with the betterments, but you really did a great job. That was very, very thorough.
The entire committee, we had a small working group, John Waterbury and Steve Layton were on it, but the entire committee contributed in one way or another to collecting this information. And you can see what a broad amount of information it was. And SIA did a meticulous job at looking at the assessor's records. And so we tried very hard to give you, these are estimates, but they're pretty solid numbers to guide you.
I just wanted to make a comment on the Barnstable County septic betterment loans. The county has loaned over $10 million in the last 3 or 4 or 5 years, and that money comes from the Water Pollution Abatement Trust. It's
right.
given to the county, then the county loans it out and collects the interest. We have just applied for another $10 million this year because the program is so successful. I mean, people really like to borrow from it. So I just want to say that it's a really viable option for people.
Yes, and most people think of it as septic repair because that's what they have. But the really significant point, and I think Jerry was the one that helped us zero in on that.
Right.
And then Pam Truesdale, former conservation member, also helped us. She's working at DEP, and it's very clear that the hookup costs can equally be spread over time with that program.
Yeah.
Any other questions from the board?
Will there be any type of information sent out to each one of the residents that possibly will be paying a betterment in the form that we just read this evening? Because I thought that was so clear, and as each question you would think of, you had the answer ready. I just thought it was a good way to explain it.
Okay, thank you. I think I would give that in 2 answers. We have not, at this point, talked about mailing out this presentation. We'll trust the enterprise will help us, but that is something we clearly could consider. And then before the actual betterment is sent, there is a certified mailing that is done by the Department of Public Works to every property owner within the sewer service area, and you will be holding a betterment hearing just the way you held a road hearing tonight. Yeah. So at that time, absolutely everybody is notified. What we have tried to do, our meetings are televised, they're covered by the enterprise. What we've tried to do is basically educate people in our normal committee process. I have talked to both Brenda Swain and Jill Bishop because they're in touch with many of people that are either on low income or senior citizens, so that they are aware of it, and I'm sure that in a variety of ways we can notify people.
Because I do believe they're talking about it.
Of course,
So,
absolutely.
okay.
And I think we should say the betterments actually don't start being charged until sometime in 2017 or 18. That has to be all constructed, all tested, and ready to go before we can start collecting. So we have some time to educate people about the various programs that will help them financially.
Virginia, I think that sentence needs to be repeated 2017. I
18.
think people think that this is coming within 24 months or something. so.
Good point, okay, it's not. But the decision on what the betterment split would be is coming now, and that's to let people know in general, more or less what it would cost them.
Well, the other thing I wanted to say is that right now, these are best estimates.
Yes.
They're not the actual number, but they're within the ballpark.
Absolutely.
Unless by some miracle, over the next 3 years, we were to get some federal funding that might help us in these, in all of the efforts around the Cape, and that could lower the cost for everybody. But that's the miracle that's out there that we're working toward.
Okay.
So it's not a done deal.
But we do need, in this town meeting, to vote a percentage. And the
Yes.
earlier we actually, as a
That's right.
board, choose that number, I think the easier it ends up to being, fighting for it,
Exactly.
pushing it, and explaining to people why we chose 50, 60, or 70%.
That's true.
Ms. Harper?
One, just order of magnitude reference, this evening's betterment hearing on Elizabeth Jean Drive, those estimates were in the $10,000 range, so over $9,000 per unit on just the road betterment, just to give you a sense of scale of what these types of projects cost and what community members are willing to pay for services in their neighborhood.
Right.
And the other issue, I think, to round out the discussion for the board, you need to reflect back on the presentation of the finance director a few weeks ago, where she presented what the impact of the different betterment scenarios are on the town's capital plan. So that's the other side of the equation. This really was the expense side, showing and definitely demonstrating what the recovery is, but what does that recovery mean to the long-term planning in terms of capital needs? And so that's that's what the board will need to evaluate when it makes a recommendation.
Any other questions from the board? This is a public meeting, of course, so anyone who has any interest in commenting or have any questions about this? Sir, if you could,
Yeah, Bob, you have to come up here.
thank you. Oh,
All right? I'll stand nearby.
and then Mr. Finneran, you had your hand up?
I'm Richard Mullen from Hudson Street in Falmouth Heights. And I had on the cost to the homeowners, the hookup fees were $2,500 to $4,000. And I was curious that Barnstable, they offer loans up to $8,000. And I was wondering why they were offering loans so high if hookups are only $2,500 to $4,000. And I saw on the Chatham website that they estimate it's $3,000 to $10,000 for hookup costs. And so that's one question is why the difference?
Sure.
And the other question is regarding the grinder pumps. As I understand it, the grinders will be bought by the city, but then I wonder who pays for the repair and replacement of those pumps?
Okay. All right.
Ms. Valiela, or?
I'll start with the range of hookup costs, because there is a range from town to town. And so you have to think about your particular sewer service area. So think about the 88% of this area that is residential. Think about those very small lots. It is a very short distance from the street into your property. So you don't have a long distance. And so I think that is the major reason to
Well, let's let her answer
Okay.
both questions, and then if you have a follow-up question.
So that's basically my answer. We talked to several local installers. So it's not a number that we just said, that sounds good. Harwich did a study of hookups, and their number was 4,000, so that just, that's, okay.
The other question was the grinders.
The low pressure, the pumps that are installed are within the 41 million for design. The actual installation is the hookup piece, and that cost is, well, as we said, that hookup cost is borne by the property owner, but the equipment is provided by the town. Ultimately, for maintenance, the homeowner is responsible. This kind of system is used on Martha's Vineyard, and with the committee visited 2 different towns on Martha's Vineyard where they're installed. They did not find that there was very high maintenance. It was like once or twice. They had a year that they would get a call about maintenance from their entire sewer service area. So we're not expecting that there would be a lot of expense.
But who pays for the maintenance?
But it is the homeowner's expense once it's installed. Jared?
Jerry Patalis, wastewater superintendent. Generally, when you buy bulk grinder pumps, you negotiate, and I think we would negotiate, a 3 to 5 year maintenance agreement within the bid price of the grinder pump unit. So you could say the first several years, let's say 3 to 5, there'll be a maintenance contract provided by a qualified, certified grinder pump rep. After that, it would be taken up by the homeowner. It could be, but it's unlikely few towns do it, that the town assumes all that O&M cost, but that includes liability of going onto people's properties, and it's a town character issue whether you do it or not. Some towns don't do it. They don't want to be involved in the extra liability, and since the maintenance costs are relatively low, it seems to be, well, it could be considered fair to have the homeowners pick it up after that.
Did you have a follow-up question?
Well, I hope those numbers are right, but they, in terms of the repair, that was not included in that table. It wasn't included there. And I'm not sure about the distance, because you said small lots, but in my area, Falmouth Heights, and I think it's true for a lot of homes, the sewer is in the back of the house, and so the sewer has to run from the front of the house. We've got a 30-foot setback, the size of the house, so it's going to be about 80 feet, plus we're going to have a U-turn. And a lot of houses have decks and patios in the back that may become an issue. So I hope the estimate of 3,000, 4,000 is right, but I have some concerns.
I think Mr. Patamas has a follow-up for that.
One of the benefits, and some people may not think it's a benefit, of the grinder pump is that you can easily get to any place you want on the property with less digging and less disruption to the landscape. The gravity folks, if you don't have a basement and you have to come out the back and it's on top of a deck and you have to dig up a patio and you have to dig up beautiful landscaping, that's an added cost. But in this respect, the grinder pump folks, and the area has already been predetermined because of elevations, they may have, and this is a big debate, but my position is they'll probably have a relatively less installation costs because you don't have to go as deep, and the contractor's cost should be lower. The homeowner may have electrical panel costs and things like that, so at this point in time, it's impossible to give a complete balance because every property is unique.
Mr. Finneran?
Mark Finneran, Precinct 6. And before I get to my point, he asked about the Barnstable County, the $8,000 figure. I think that's because it's a loan program which also covers leach fields and septic systems and whatever, so a figure that high would be necessary. I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure that's the case. Sia, can you turn that back to the last slide? Just something that I just noticed now, although I've been thinking about it for a while, and tell me if I'm wrong. But with this betterment system, and we're using old debt, the famous window of opportunity, there seems to be a sweet spot in there that doesn't get noticed. Let's take the 50% because I think that's as high as it should be, because this is probably going to be the last sewering in this town. But it does get paid for, the original 41 million, correct me if I'm wrong, gets paid for with the window of opportunity, the expired debt, or whatever it was. But then, as the betterments are paid, in the 50% scenario, 20.5 million gets paid back to the town. So is that not actually, in essence, a windfall for the town? I mean, doesn't that 20 million get added to the general fund, if you prefer? And it's kind of, if
Perhaps
that-
not to the general fund, but it would be.
Well, they're gonna pay it, or they're gonna.
I believe
where's
that
it
would
gonna
be
go?
utilized to pay down the debt. And I'm seeing a lot of nodding heads here, so my assumption is correct, that that money would go towards paying down the debt, which would help that window, if you will. And perhaps a member of the committee could better explain it than I
Doesn't really
can.
jive, because it's a floating number, and the 41 million's the same, is it?
Perhaps someone knows a little more about municipal finance that could answer this question than I could.
This is what Jennifer did.
Yeah,
Jerry
and
Patamas, no one knows anything about municipal finance. I'd suggest that's a question for the finance director. I mean, it's complicated. I mean, I've tried it, and the finance director has to balance the cash flow with these estimates to make it gel, because it's all about cash flow.
It's really not complicated. Every year, the town has to raise and appropriate 100% of the cost of the debt required to pay off the note. If the general fund is benefiting by the betterment payments, then those betterment payments will reduce that which the taxpayer has to raise.
That makes sense.
a follow-up?
Again, that makes that window of opportunity that the town actually has to come up with smaller. In the 50% case, it's 50%. So that money does actually go back into the, and it can be used for, you may use it for that, but it can be used for anything. I just want to point that out. It seems to be the way I see it anyway.
I
follow.
think
I think it's exactly what the finance director did point out to us, that if we do a 50% betterment, we will be opening our window a little bit for other opportunities that we are, the $41 million in funding is within our current window, as we keep calling it. We want to keep reducing how much we owe as much as we can, and that's what the betterments will allow us to do.
I think.
It reduces what we owe. Yeah, that's true.
We will have, I think we're going to have at least 2 more meetings on this, because we will have to have, obviously, the betterment hearing. It may also benefit us at that point to not only bring you folks back for that, but also to bring the finance director back so that we can get all of the information, and anyone who has questions from the neighborhood, from the affected area, we'll have all of the necessary experts here, and then we may need to stew on it and actually take a vote in a following meeting. So there's a minimum of 2 other meetings here, potentially a third, depending on how much information or how many questions have to be ironed out during the betterment hearing.
The betterment hearing doesn't actually occur till
Yeah.
much later in the process.
I just wanted to
That's
Oh, I
correct you on the
apologize.
yes, the actual official betterment hearing is about a year from now.
Oh, okay.
Okay, you, I mean, obviously, public meetings and discussion, any number is fine, but it will not be the official betterment hearing with certified mail to
Right.
each property. It will be a discussion of percentages with approximate numbers, because nothing is being assessed at this point.
Okay.
The town is,
So-
as Heather just said, the town is front-ending the full cost
Right.
at this point, and we
So in
have the
essence,
budget to do it.
So what I'm thinking of then is the public meeting to get feedback, to come up with decisions.
Right.
But no formal
Choosing.
hearing until.
A year from now.
A year from now, okay.
I would really encourage us to be on the March 10th meeting, is when we make our vote on the percentage, so that we and other people can get out there and really push the vote, saying, this is the number we're looking for, and we can have the finance director come back and say, what effect will the 50% and 70%, which I think are the 2 recommendations of the committee, which I would like to support, what effect would that have on our future finances, and then make that decision based on that, and have public input at that.
So you want to actually bring the information back, have a vote on the 10th, as well as presentations?
I think we've already had the presentation from the finance committee on, as a finance director, on this, anticipating the possible betterments. I would just like to see that again, say, okay, I really want to understand what that means, I think partly to Mr. Finneran's point, and make sure we really understand And we've heard recommendation from the committee that we asked to do this work, and their recommendation is either 50 or 70. And those are the two numbers we asked the finance director, say, okay, what does it look like, 50%?
Yeah.
What does it look like, 70%? And then we have to make a vote. And it could be 60. We could say, we want the number in the middle.
But for everyone's edification, though, I think also we need to allow the public the opportunity to weigh in on this. And my only concern is, yes, we've had the finance director here. Yes, we've obviously have the Water Quality Management Committee here. Both have presented two pieces to the puzzle. But, I mean, look around us. There's not a whole lot of folks here. And I would be shocked if there's no interest whatsoever in how this betterment is going to be laid out or presented. I really think that if we want to aim for March 10, I would say let's advertise it, make it very well known that the board is collecting information and potentially making a decision. But I would be very reluctant to make a decision on March 10, knowing that we've got no time to really stop and digest the information and get the public feedback. I mean, there may be folks who don't realize until the March 10 meeting that what's coming up, and we might get written comment after that. I wouldn't want to try to rush this too much. I know we need to get it done in advance of town meeting, but the risk of rushing it is that we don't have the support of the affected area, and it crashes and burns. I mean, we've seen that happen before.
It's the one time we can actually get it in the written recommendation
yeah.
on the warrant. And I think to have this decision not made until after we can get it in print is a mistake on our part.
I do too, and I think also, remember, it's an estimate. It's based, I mean, obviously, the percentage and all of that is the estimate, but it doesn't mean that a year from now, we might look at it a little bit differently. But for now, this is the way we see it going. And I think people who live in the Little Pond area have been paying a whole lot of attention to your work, the committee, and are very involved and are very knowledgeable about what this, I mean, my guess is they're pretty knowledgeable about what this is all about. Would you say that? I mean, I don't want to put words in your mouth.
We made an effort to reach out to both the Falmouth Heights and the Mara Vista associations, and we have met with them, and they have attended the meeting. And Mr. Mullen has been a very faithful attendee at our recent meetings from Falmouth Heights.
I don't think there's a lot of widespread knowledge.
But
No.
that's all, and that's always the case.
Right.
No matter how much you've done.
It's never enough.
But I think it would behoove us, when we advertise that we're going to be having this discussion, to make sure that the respective associations know and that they can notify their membership. But again, I guess we'll find out in the next week as we start to craft these agendas and look at the 10th and maybe even on the 10th. But again, I would caution us from rushing too quickly. I understand what you're saying about having the recommendations in the warrant, but it wouldn't be the first time that we said the board was going to present its recommendation on town meeting floor. And certainly in a situation such as this, it's a lot of money, it's a lot of affected families. I really am reluctant to rush this along.
Mr. Chairman, could I?
We have some more public comment. Mr. McNamara? And then Julian,
Good evening, Matt McNamara, Precinct 7. Part of the information was that in this service sewer center, only 1/3 of the residences are owner-occupied. The first question I had was, what was the significance of that information tonight as to the betterments? But the second point I want to make is that if in fact 2/3 are not here at this time of the year, you're leaving out a lot of information that might help you in terms of the sentiment of what the percentage would be. But I was interested, other than a just good piece of information, what value it was for the betterment question.
Mr. Patamas, you have an answer to that?
I don't have any answer, but I have an option that the selectmen and town meeting consider. You're just in town meeting is just estimating a percent betterment. This summer, the discussion can go on, and you can bring it back to fall town meeting, because you don't have to really start crunching the numbers probably until after that. So there is a safety net if all of a sudden you come up with a percentage over the summer, people, you get feedback. You could revisit the percent in November town meeting. You don't set the dollar figure till we'll hope to open bids in February, April. that's when you're really going to need to set the dollar figure, because we'll know what the maximum amount. And then after that, at the end of the construction, they'll have a actual betterment that could be less than the maximum, but it can't be more than the
But
maximum.
we're asking the townspeople at ballot to vote money, and now you're going to change the amount of money that they're going to get paid back.
No, I'm just saying, you have a choice on percent betterment.
Eric Turkington, Precinct 1, and Chairman of the Water Quality Committee. And Virginia's been doing so well, I was hoping not to have to say a word, but to answer Mr. McNamara's question about the two-thirds of the residences that are not occupied by year-round homeowners, about a third of them are second homes, okay, and we would not expect them to be here now, or in April or May. The other third are rentals, owned by landlords who are presumably paying attention as much as the homeowners are. And so that's the breakdown. And the final quarter is commercial properties, which are obviously paying attention too. So I don't think there's a lack of people paying attention in this time period. Ideally, you would do it in July when all the summer people were here, but we don't do much in July of this nature. The other point that I think is worth saying is Mr. Jones is right. There's two articles in this town meeting. One is the betterment one, and the next one is the 41 million. But the second one is so huge, I don't think you can go into that discussion without having answered the first one, at least to the best of our ability. And putting it off until November wouldn't do that.
You had a follow-up, Mr. Finneran?
Yeah, well, while we're talking numbers and percentages, I didn't make it to the wastewater meeting because my back wouldn't let me get off the floor, but I did watch it, and I believe there was another number that I heard that the senior citizen population was somewhere like 43 or 45% of all these properties, which may or may not have an effect on it because they have an out, or I mean, several outs, actually, I believe. So just for information, it wasn't on that.
Something substantive? We're starting to get into back and forth stuff. Okay.
I think I didn't make myself clear. The point being is go ahead and do whatever you have to do to establish a percent betterment at spring town meeting. That can be revisited if needed at the fall town meeting if there was a disconnect. And obviously, if the people did want to vote a different betterment percentage, it would get voted down. So it was not to delay it. It was you have a choice after you get feedback after town meeting that it's not a done deal. You have one more town meeting to adjust it, and maybe you don't adjust it. Look at New Silver Beach, you had 3 different percentages.
I hear what you're saying. Of course, I always was taught that if you don't have time to do it right the first time, when are you going to have time to do it right over again? So, Mr. Suso, you've been waiting patiently.
Oh, that's okay, Mr. Chairman. I just wanted to underscore that what's been indicated, but I'm afraid perhaps lost a little bit, and that is that none of these are final numbers, and the actual number will not be completed until all construction is done. So we're talking several years into the future here, which ties in with what Virginia Valella mentioned earlier, that it is several years off before this would actually begin to occur. So we need to be cautious. It's fine when we're talking about relative percentages and how they might be applied, but we need to be careful not to zero in on any number and suggest that estimates are firm numbers. As indicated, we will not even be out to bid for another 12 months. And if all goes well, we'll have a firmer number at that point. But it still will not be a final number because all construction will not be completed. So that is another, in all likelihood, 18 to 24 months beyond that, beyond the bid time. So all in all, at least 3 years out on a final number that we're looking at. So I just wanted to underscore that so people don't zero in on a final dollar figure.
Okay. Any other questions from the board?
No, I just had a comment, and I think the real meat of the vote is not so much the actual number or estimate, it's the percentage that we really have to concentrate on. And town meeting, as I recall from the last vote of Silver Beach, town meeting has very strong opinions on what these percentages should be. Also, there was very lively discussion at that town meeting regarding Silver Beach, as I recall.
All the more reason, too, to be careful about how quickly we move through this, because we could end up with something at town meeting where if there were folks who felt left out of the process, we could end up with a fight on the floor that makes it more difficult for us to move this forward, so. Things for, food for thought, folks. Any last questions from the board or from the audience? Well, thank you all very much for your efforts. The information is fantastic, very detailed, and we have some decisions to make, so.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you.
All right, the next item on our agenda is a review of the town meeting articles. We have to make some recommendations on some of the articles for the spring town meeting and the spring special town meeting. These are the articles that we have jurisdiction over.
Correct. Or that we're suggesting that the board may want to weigh in on.
Okay.
Thank you.
If it's agreeable, Mr. Chairman, I can have Heather Harper walk us through these.
Sure, that'd be a good idea, actually. Maybe help us focus our attention on what we need to do with each of these,
So
or what we could do.
drafted up a quick listing of the articles that are either under the jurisdiction of the Board of Selectmen or represent major policy areas for the town that you may wish to provide guidance, particularly to the Finance Committee on. Beginning with the annual town meeting, the board's work really begins on Article 13. Everything prior to that is either zoning or very basic budgetary. You can take a look at them. If the board feels it wants to weigh in on any of the others, let us know. But this is, Julie and I reviewed these this afternoon. The first one is to establish an out-of-district special education tuition stabilization fund. And that is a major policy change for the town by establishing that to support the school department and is part of the overall strategy to provide some stabilization for that volatile spending area for the school department.
My question would be, what would be the source of funding for that? Would the school department determine that?
The Finance Committee.
The Finance Committee will.
These are all going to be Finance Committee recommendations, but in many cases, we believe the Finance Committee would benefit from some guidance on terms of policy from the board. So if the board wants to take a vote on these, we'd share that with the Finance Committee, and the Finance Director may include that in her recommendation drafted for the Finance Committee.
But the funding, it's actually Article 14. This is just creating,
It's just creating it.
and this is a stabilization
Right, to
fund
establish it, right.
that would have to put money in requires a two-thirds vote, and to get
Take
money out
requires
requires a
a
two-thirds
two-thirds
vote.
vote.
And there are a couple of sources contemplated for that, and that we're not looking for the board to vote on the sources or the amount, just really the concept that, of the stabilization fund.
Well, I guess my only comment in that would be, for all the years, the school department has had money in their budget somewhere that when they need it for a particular purpose like special ed, they can move it from one account to the other because they can move money among lines that the town cannot do. And I guess I would wonder why they would want to restrict the monies that they have and putting it in funds like that, that makes it harder for them to access it.
Well, the difference is, if I may.
Oh, I see, I just.
This is a proposal that the town managers and the Finance Committee have developed with the school department to address what is an immediate problem with sped education, which is across the Cape and across the Commonwealth, that is uncertain as to how volatile that is. The school department themselves is still working to whittle down what the number really is for fiscal 14 and for fiscal 15. This allows some budgetary flexibility over the next couple of years without subsidizing the budget for special education. It allows to compartmentalize sped from the operations so it can be clearly understood what those expense pressures are on the budget.
As I understand, if we didn't do this, you might have to increase their total budget by $2 million, which they don't really need, as it turns out, for that year because the sped budget isn't that high. It's just that, to say it's going to go up and down that much by their operating budget is going to actually give them more.
I guess that's the question, how much does it really go up and down, and could they establish an average across the board?
It's what they used to do, and in the past few years, it's been just unpredictable because You know, it can be two kids moving to town, and each one of them cost $80,000 that just
Right,
weren't expecting.
right,
Good questions.
okay.
And 14 is the funding for 13.
So, yes, and so the goal of tonight's meeting is to get a sense of the board vote on these, so that we can come back to you on the 10th with an actual recommendation for vote by the board, as we've done in the last few years, which has worked out very well. 14 isn't necessary for the board, I'm just keeping them in order, so
Oh,
really it's
okay.
13. And then again, 15 is the establishment of the Water Stabilization Fund, which is a policy initiative of this board to move slowly towards the
Enterprise fund?
Water Enterprise Fund.
Right,
And that is,
definitely.
as I understand it, that's
important.
something of a requirement from the state in order to get the revolving funds. There was something in there that we were, I know, obviously, we've been talking about it as a board, but I thought there was something there that was sort of moving us in that direction, that a state requirement or something of that effect, no?
I can't say that it's a state requirement. What
Okay.
it does is it allows us to appropriate those funds outside of the operating budget and to move into the practice of budgeting water revenue separate.
Jennifer explained that if we didn't do this, this helps to improve our bond rating and prepare for the revolving fund. If we don't do
Okay,
this,
maybe that's what I'm
the
thinking of then.
adjustment between what we're doing now and the revolving fund would just be too big, and we wouldn't be able to support it from a financial point of view. Our timetable of this is that we're hoping to actually vote the recommendations themselves on March 10th. Is that correct?
Correct.
Yes.
And we won't have discussion of them next week because that's the.
The
so we had-
workshop.
Right, so we have to get the wording of what the recommendation suggestions to Heather now.
A
so we can-
preliminary feel for what the direction the board is going in, so that she can provide us, on the 10th, we'll have written draft, and we can make some final tweaks if necessary.
Okay, thank you.
Do you want to take these one at a time, starting with 13? Would you like to go through all of them first and then back through?
Well, why don't we go through them one at a time? How do we feel about 13 at this point? I mean, I'm comfortable with the recommendations of the town manager's office and the finance committee. If they believe that this is going to be a cure, or I shouldn't say a cure, there's probably no cure, but a mitigation strategy for the issue.
Mr. Chairman, could I just add one other
Sure.
piece of input that our understanding is that special education has been relatively stable within several $100,000 variation over the last several years for reasons not fully understood by me and perhaps by others. We seem to have a spike in one year that approaches $1 million. And given that very significant variability in one year, it makes tremendous sense to set up this stabilization fund because it is unknown whether this spike which has been identified is going to be continuous or just a blip on the chart. But putting it in a stabilization fund, as has been alluded to by Doug and others, it gives you the ability to respond to a significant need without necessarily going overboard based upon insufficient information and beefing up the long-term budget. So the stabilization fund with the checks and balances, the 2/3 in, 2/3 out, gives time for the school department to really get a better handle on whether this is just a short-term variability or evidence of a more significant long-term trend. Because what we have seen more recently is not indicative of the past trend, but it is something that we need to responsibly address. This seems to be a very responsible way to do that. That's why we bring it forward, working with the school department and others.
Would you say that the stabilization fund then would be run on the town side and would not be involved in the school side budget?
Well, I think.
Would it be a separate item? Is it being pulled out and a separate item on the town side?
It would be set aside as a separate fund, and the need for utilizing that fund would be brought to town meeting either at the spring or the fall meetings as the reality of special education would dictate. And then with a 2/3 vote, those funds could be moved out and devoted to special education, but would be set aside exclusively for that purpose.
And I'm just using these numbers. If you had a $40 million school budget, and that included all special ed monies, circuit breaker, chapter set, includes all of them. Would you subtract from the 40 million the amount that would go into this stabilization fund? And if it were $2 million going for special ed, you would then have a school budget of 38 million.
I would not advocate that at this time because this appears to be a change in the past trends. So you set it into stabilization, you leave the school budget intact as it has been, and keep them whole, and set this aside while we determine what the long-term trend really is. So the stabilization is really an insurance policy to help the schools more effectively manage that.
That's what I needed to know.
Stabilization
Thank
fund
you.
would not be used as an operating budget piece.
Correct, not an
Okay.
operating budget piece.
But the management of the fund or the decision to access it would be from the school department, not from the town. Is that?
From the school department.
It's their
in-
fund.
In a dialogue with town meeting
Right.
ultimately.
With town
Correct.
meeting, the school department and town meeting,
Yes.
not the town.
Correct.
Yeah, yes, but.
That's what-
Yes, yes. Okay. All right.
And I think there's a benefit to this as well, because certainly there are questions in my mind. One of the things I heard about the current deficit with the schools is that there was some sort of an accounting error. I have concerns about them bringing forth a $1.6 million deficit and then discovering after the fact that there was some sort of an accounting error that it constituted a part of that deficit. I think establishing this fund will, if nothing else, perhaps force a little bit more transparency, because they're going to have to come back to town meeting to get money out of this. And it means that with a 2/3 vote required to do that, they're going to have to put all the cards on the table and show us a little bit more of the school budget. I think in years past, you think about the budget and the transparency issues, and it always seems like the school budget is a little bit more fuzzy, hazy, if you will, at least from my perspective, having been in town meeting.
Well, I think this year you have to remember that you had a brand-new superintendent, a brand-new finance director, and they were dealing with a budget that they've never seen before. And they were dealing with it from different perspectives. I mean, our new school superintendent worked in a district where you didn't have any responsibility for doing a budget. So I think there were some getting used to it and getting to know the system that probably had something to do with it, I would think.
Well, I would defend the school budget because it was a person that had been there for 20 years. And I would say that as monies were available or not available, the person that took care of the school budget always did a wonderful job. I would never use the word fuzzy.
Okay?
So is it appropriate to move it, or that I would move that we
So where are we
recommend
now?
Article 13?
Well, we're not making recommendations tonight, but we can express, are we in agreement then that we're all, is there a consensus that we want to move that we want to recommend Article 13, and then we'll have the actual written recommendation will be brought back to us for a formal vote?
And I guess that's what I thought we were ready. We were going to vote the written recommendation, but we need to vote whether we are saying yea or nay.
That's right. We need to vote for
Yeah.
that.
Well, we don't necessarily have to vote if there's consensus agreement. I'm comfortable with that. Robert's Rules of Order allows for consensus. If there's no dissent, then we're all in agreement, correct? All right.
Whatever.
Article 14 is for 13. Article 15, the Water Stabilization Fund. Any discussion? Are we all in agreement there?
Yes.
All right, so, Article 22, the high school construction review. Well, you all know how I feel about that. I think it's an appropriate article, and I think,
I would say no on Article 22.
Doug, Pat?
I don't feel that it would be, when it comes to a vote, I will not be supporting it. I think that the project is, I think the vagueness of the article concerns me. I think that we've been down this road. I think to put $25,000 more to it, I don't think we're going to get any money out of it by doing this, and I don't think we're going to save any money by doing it.
Pat?
My sentiments.
All right. Well, it looks like that one, it'll be a negative recommendation. You know, I would like to remind the board, though, that the currency of government is trust and openness and transparency. And while we may not get any money back from this, and while some folks may think that spending another $25,000 on the project, given the amount of money that's been spent on it so far, might be a little frivolous or perhaps a little too much. The reality is that we have the sewers, we have the waters, the water filtration plant, we have an all-purpose field. There's requests on here for an override for the schools. There are a lot of spending articles, a lot of overrides on this ballot. In years to come, there are other schools that are going to need to be renovated. The Lawrence School is old and getting older. We potentially, I think we have a funding article to put windows and a roof on the Lawrence School, and that's only the tip of the iceberg as we go down the road. If we expect the people of Falmouth to continue to vote in favor of these overrides, I think it behooves us to make sure that we are giving them reason to trust us, and that includes going back and looking at some of these things and asking ourselves if there's a better way, as Margot Fennell said, that is there a process improvement here that could be done?
And I would counter with, we have the Morse Pond renovation, we have the previous Lawrence School renovation, we have the library renovation. We have many, many renovations that we've done that have worked well, and the process has worked in those. And I do understand that there were some problems with the high school renovation project, but that was one project that did have some issues, and the other ones I think have gone very well and generally been on time and on budget.
All right, well, I don't think I've changed any minds, so there'll be a
think so.
negative recommendation on that one. The high school athletic field.
I'm a positive on that one.
I am too.
That's the direction I'm leaning. I'm not sure how to guide Heather on what she's going to write for our recommendation.
Perhaps we should have both. I like the idea, I understand the benefits of it. I have some concerns. One of the questions I asked was whether the committee had talked to other communities that have built these fields, and the answer I got was a little muddled. I think there could have been a stronger response in terms of the homework that has been done and what they've done exactly in terms of who they've talked to, the pitfall. I asked about pitfalls, and I was given no feedback in terms of the pitfalls that other communities have encountered, and we talk about process and so on, and this is one that I'm a little concerned about.
Well, I just think it should be a town meeting vote. I mean, it's a major project, it benefits a lot of people in the community, and I think we should let town meeting decide it, and not us.
I agree with that.
Well, town meeting will decide it, but we still have to give a recommendation, either positive or negative, so.
I'm staying with a positive.
Positive, I got a negative, I got a
Positive.
positive, I got a halfway between. Why don't we have two recommendations, if that's possible, because
We
Mr.
can't
Murphy, I
have two.
believe, will be here, and
If-
he'll be the tiebreaker.
Well, maybe we should wait till Kevin comes next week, and then we can decide whether it's a...
Oh, well, yeah, we will ultimately have
Yeah.
that decision
So
then,
we
but
can make it next week instead of tonight.
I can drop.
What?
We can draft it in two.
You can draft two different recommendations
Right.
then, and then when we can decide next week.
Article 27, that one is,
Done, we already voted it.
no, we haven't,
But we had actually-
Tonight.
this is the betterment share, the recommendation.
Oh, the betterment, I was looking
Yeah.
at Elizabeth Jean Drive.
That, I
We're
think
gonna
that's
float that
something.
next week.
Yeah, we're going to have to
Or
float that at the
when-
next
or in
meeting.
March, whichever. Well, we have to have something for the recommendation, though.
I'll draft it with
You
the
can draft
percentage
it.
left blank.
Okay.
That sounds
That
good.
works.
Elizabeth Jean Drive, we've just voted for that this evening, so
Recommendation.
I think it's a positive recommendation.
I think so.
Otherwise, we'll have the residents coming back and know what we're doing.
Article 15, or 14, excuse me, this is this is a petitioner's article, correct? This
Yes,
was.
this is the one.
Yes, Lynn Whitehead.
Okay, so yeah.
I'd like to wait and see what the school department's going to, is that, I mean, they've gotten more money now, so I don't know if they want an override.
I think in their
They do?
school committee meeting, I'm not sure if it was a vote, but there was a discussion that they would not back an override.
They would not back an
Right.
override. So maybe we
As
should
that is
just
coming
say,
from the superintendent to the school committee members.
I think it's likely they're going to want an override next year, and to go for one this year and next year.
Oh.
is the
So we
recommendation
should
as
then-
being,
Yeah.
that we should not recommend it then.
I would say we don't
Okay,
recommend that.
I'm for that.
I wasn't going to support it anyway, so that sounds unanimous. Let's see, Article 16, invite CPC, wait,
Just
sorry,
Mr.
could you
Chairman, I
provide
wanted
some
to
background?
explain that, yes. This is a land acquisition being presented by the CPC,
Okay.
which the board has not been briefed on at all yet, and the board
Yeah,
obviously
but what's
makes all land
this?
decisions ultimately. So my suggestion is you invite the CPC in open or executive session, depending on the status of their negotiation, to get an update on that from the CPC.
Okay,
That's the chairman's discretion. But that's another, it's a policy item for the board.
all right, so we'll discuss getting that on the agenda then for the 10th. Article 18?
The next two will be as recommended. We may have a final recommendation for you by March 10th. The first one, Article 18, relates to the area of Alphonse Street, which is abuts the T-Ticket School, which is under the jurisdiction of the school committee. Town council will have a formal motion and recommendation for that, but that will be an as recommended, allows us to put the lift station at the end of Alphonse Street. And the other is related to the proposed location of the water treatment facility, which has the same jurisdictional issues that are being evaluated, but we don't have a final recommendation for you yet.
Okay.
So
All
those
right.
will both need the board's vote.
Any questions about those?
No.
All right. That gets us through that. So we'll have the recommendations to actually vote on the March 10 agenda. I'm not doing too bad, actually, considering the length of the agenda. We have, on a few occasions, the next item on our agenda here is a beginning discussion of parking regulations. The board has, over the last number of months, from the beginning of the year, actually I say the beginning of the year, but from last summer, last June, I believe it was, when the Capital Advisory Committee had presented recommendations to the board. It included the idea of parking meters in the Main Street area. We've had other discussions about parking regulations, and so to have a full and complete discussion, you should all have copies of the existing parking regulations for the town of Falmouth. I don't know that we're going to go into any significant detail this evening, but I want to make sure that you all had this. I know Rebecca specifically had asked for a discussion of parking regulations, so we can review these, and if you have any
Well,
questions.
I have the selectmen's policies on traffic calming and traffic management that were voted. I looked up the policy book, and these were voted, I think, in 2006. They're fairly brief, and they're, you might notice that when we did the revitalization of Main Street, we put in traffic calming, and that, what do you call those, bump outs? We put in the bump outs on Main Street, and that was all related to this traffic calming. So I pulled out those policies, and then I also pulled out the policies on residential parking issues in Woods Hole. So I thought maybe you might want to take, and the police chief has a book on traffic regulations that go back to 1938. He has, remember when Doc Jones was a selectman? There are lots of policies that are in that book from all boards of selectmen that are still sort of in effect. They've never been, it's just really peculiar. Yeah, you can
If you
have one of
look
those.
at
What?
the preamble to the traffic rules and orders, just above the table of contents, it says on here that these are superseding traffic regulations adopted and enacted May 10, 1938. So this,
Really? Yeah.
So this is
there's-
the last word.
I think it is.
And you know what this looks like, the one that you provided? Something that the Registry of Motor Vehicles would give a 16-year-old who is learning how to drive and needs to know what intersections are and what stop signs are and what all the signage is. I said, we have the most bizarre stuff when you think about it on traffic. It's unbelievable.
I think a lot of this, this is a good idea for us to do some homework to go through this, because this is essentially, when we talk about the parking issues and the traffic issues on Main Street, this is really where we're going to begin. If we want to have any discussion about parking meters, about how we might manage parking in the Main Street area in order to address the excessive traffic in the summertime, that there may be some changes that we could make to these, there may be some additions that we need to make. This is where the discussion will begin, is with these documents. So.
And one thing you might find, when you read this policy that was done in '06, I wasn't on the board in '06, so I wasn't part of this, but that's when the Traffic Advisory Committee was established at that time. And the whole purpose of that advisory committee was not only to deal with citizen complaints or issues. Like, I remember one issue was someone came to a stop sign at an intersection, and the people who owned the property on the left-hand side had hedges, and the hedges were so high that when they came to the intersection, they couldn't see whether they could go through. And so they went to the Traffic Advisory Committee, and then they got the DPW. So I'm thinking, and the other thing was that the Traffic Advisory Committee is the group that, and it's headed by a captain or a lieutenant, not a captain, but a lieutenant or someone, and that I think if we look at the things that we would like to see studied, we could give those to the Traffic Advisory Committee and say, you take a look at these, and you take a look at all the rules and regulations, and come back to us with some recommendations, rather than us trying to deal with all the down and dirty in terms of what we're going to do, because none of us are traffic experts. But they are, for the most part, but particularly when you have a police officer, and Barbara Pratt, who's also she does the parking tickets, and she's pretty knowledgeable. And they could work, and Ahmed, I think, is still on that. And I don't know who the other 2 or 3 members are, but we could look at that and say, look, here's some things that we need studied. We need to know how many people park on Main Street every day, and how long do they park? Do they park for 2 hours or 1 hour? And there's loads of studies that are already somewhere in the town where those, like when the MMA cadets did those studies. So we could look at that, and from that decide, what is it that we want to accomplish with parking and regulations and all that sort of thing? And ask somebody else to do the work for us, like the Water Quality Management Committee did. I thought they did a super job on the betterments, and then come back to us with some ideas and plans. That's what I would suggest. Then we don't have to get too involved. That's all their side.
Maybe one thing I want to take a look at, or at least give people a
Get
heads
an
up on,
idea of what this is.
a specific thing on page 17. It talks about of the regulations. Because I'm so confused by this. In section 5.6 and section 5.7.
Yeah,
Talk about parking is prohibited in accordance with scheduled streets designated as Schedule Number 1. And section 5.7.1 talks about Schedule 1A, which were never filled out and completed. We actually don't have a Schedule 1 or Schedule 1A attached to this, and it is on file anywhere. The parking passes that you handed out here talks about resident parking permits and talks about in-street designated as resident parking permit area, but that's not connected, it doesn't say which areas in town are resident. We don't have any regulations that actually say where these regulations that we have apply.
the other thing that we have parking regulations now that say no one can park anywhere in the town for more than 1 hour, anywhere.
It does say that.
It does say that.
Yeah.
And, I mean, we have all kinds of stuff out there.
That says only in off-street parking area here and designated in Schedule 1A. That's where that, that's where that
no
line comes-
Schedule 1A.
And there's no Schedule 1A to say where those streets are.
I think we ought to read all this and then come back and say, what do we want the Traffic Advisory Committee to do for us?
We have some
I
homework
think
to
it's
do.
the
Something like
Traffic
that.
Advisory Committee that we need to have our
Oh.
conversation with, because I think as far as the traffic rules and the orders is not the issue of what I see as the problem with the
Okay.
traffic on Main Street. And when I talk about that, I talk about it from Davisville Road to Locust Street. And when I read this, I kept trying to find something that was going to give me some kind of guidance, and I really went through this. This is not our issue. What you just handed to me as I look, kind of skim over this, I think it's the Traffic Advisory Commission, and I will read these tonight and see, but it's not this.
I have two other comments. we put the bump outs on Main Street because we wanted the traffic to slow down. We
Yeah.
didn't want people speeding on Main Street. So those bump outs actually prevent people from driving too fast on Main Street. You know, the bump
You can't
outs,
drive fast on Main Street in
that's because of the,
summertime.
well, because of the bump outs too. The bump outs.
Well, you don't need
But-
any bump outs, you can't drive fast.
But here's
down Main Street.
another paragraph on that regulation thing on page 38. Listen to what it says. The Board of Selectmen of the Town of Falmouth hereby declare that they would have passed these rules and regulations and each section, subsection, sentence, clause, or phrase thereof, irrespective of the fact that any one or more sections, subsections, sentences, clauses, or phrases be declared unconstitutional. Can you imagine anything more bizarre than that? That actually threw me for a loop. We're doing it, even if they're unconstitutional. We know they could be, but they're out there anyway. Unbelievable.
Standard disclaimer, I would think.
Isn't it, though?
It's, a lot of laws are passed with,
That if one little piece is unconstitutional,
yeah,
the rest
the
still
rest
holds.
still applies,
Yeah,
yeah.
it's a
There's a
disclosure.
specific term for that, and I forget what it is off the top of my head, but,
I think it's all right.
yeah, it is interesting, though, that sort of legalese, you find it
Oh.
in all sorts of, all sorts of regulations, apparently. All right, so we have some homework to do, and we'll continue that discussion in one of the upcoming meetings. At this point, the individual selectmen's reports, anyone have anything they want to share? Doesn't
Well, I would say on Thursday, the Cape Cod Commission is going to hear our comprehensive wastewater management plan and approve it under the DRI regulations. And following that hearing, the Cape Cod Commission is going to continue the public hearing on the monopole that the company wants to erect over on Carrot Shop? Yeah, Carrot Shop Road, out near, right next to Tony Andrews' farm. And there's a lot of residential opposition to that monopole. So anybody who's interested in attending, it begins at 3 o'clock at the Assembly of Delegates in the First District Court.
I did attend the school committee meeting 2 weeks ago in which they discussed the budget number that they were going to, they were deliberating over it. And I'll try to attend the meeting tomorrow night also when they're, I hope, going to actually make a choice on what that number will be.
All right, anyone else?
No, but I want to thank everyone for the birthday party and all my friends who brought the cake and all the good wishes and everything else. And thank you for celebrating it with me.
Any questions about the town manager's report? Mr. Suso, is there anything you need to highlight?
Just a couple items, Mr. Chairman. I was pleased to attend the Cape Cod Commission's workshop on regional economic development priority projects held this past Thursday in Chatham. I know Selectman Flynn was also able to be there. As I advised the board in an earlier email, we have transmitted a significant number of ongoing proposed projects for potential consideration in this process. There is no guarantee of funding, of course, but given the county's recent designation by the Federal Economic Development Administration, this certainly enhances the possibility. So the town wants to be adequately prepared. As was noted earlier, there was an inaugural meeting of the Falmouth Senior Center Site Visibility Working Group. I did sit in on that initial meeting. There are some other members to be added to that group, as the board has heard. This past Saturday, I was pleased to attend the Chamber of Commerce's forum at the Seacrest Hotel regarding future challenges and opportunities for our region. As you will recall, this was convened in recognition of the Chamber's 100th anniversary year and to serve as a potential springboard for the future. It was a very well-attended forum, very enlightening. Also, tomorrow we are working with staff members of the Wacoit Bay National Estuarine Research Reserve in a workshop to identify the town of Falmouth's strengths and weaknesses regarding resilience to storms and other natural disasters. It's certainly something that we hear a lot about. As the board is aware, we're very pleased working with Webner. We're able to be one of the first communities to step out and begin this deliberative workshop process that can affect our response and our emergency plans going forward. It'll be held at the Fire Department headquarters tomorrow morning. It'll primarily include key staff members and others involved in storm and disaster response. Also, as a reminder, we've noted that next Monday, March 3rd, the board scheduled a workshop session with other boards and committees for 7 p.m., and that will be in the Herman Room of the main library rather than here in Town Hall, and it's to discuss the newly approved committee handbook and related matters that the board has long wanted to discuss with members of boards and commissions. Your next regular business meeting will, of course, be Monday, March 10th. And to echo Selectman Flynn's comment about the final public hearing by the Cape Cod Commission on our CWMP, they have a development of regional impact review, and we did meet. I and a few staff members met with Cape Cod Commission staff this past Friday, discussing their recommendations to be brought forward at this hearing. We are guardedly optimistic that we will get a positive, a favorable vote yet this week, so that we can move forward unfettered and undelayed in a project that benefits so many communities, obviously, along with the town of Falmouth. Also, I want to applaud the reopening of the North Falmouth Branch Library following significant upgrade and renovation that was approved by a town meeting in the recent past. I understand that open house of the new renovation has been set for this Friday, February 28th, from 4 to 6 p.m. And that concludes my report. Thank you.
Thank you. I just want to draw everyone's attention. I had sent an email out yesterday with some specific agenda items for the upcoming workshop with the committees. If anyone has any feedback on that, please let me know. We'll be finalizing that agenda tomorrow afternoon.
I just have one other comment. The Board of Regional Commissioners submitted to the Assembly of Delegates a budget of $28 million last week, and we also agreed as commissioners to fund $750,000 toward 200 of which will go towards the flyover, for the Cape, for all the towns will be able to participate in the one flyover. And the other $550,000 is going to go toward the development of the regional area network and the Strategic Information Office, which will begin to create the networks for all the towns and the schools and the libraries and the police departments, fire departments, and all the towns to be able to connect to the Open Cape network. So that's going to take off this year. So I just thought you'd like to know that.
Just follow up on that comment. I attended the meeting of the managers working with
Governance Committee?
Yes, the Governance Committee, thank you, this afternoon. And that was the topic of discussion, was the Regional Wide Area Network. And they've solicited proposals, received 2 proposals to construct the Regional Wide Area Network for municipalities funded by the county. And they've identified Cape Net as the most responsive and responsible bidder, and they're proceeding to negotiate a contract with them, which should result in the next several months, making that last mile available to communities at a very low or possibly no cost. And the funds that Selectman Flynn is talking about are annual operating costs that would be funded by the county for 1, 2, or even longer, depending on what the actual costs come in at. It's a huge contribution to all the communities. It helps us all advance the type of the robust infrastructure that we need to operate and meet community demands on. So it's a real positive, important effort, and benefiting the schools significantly as well.
Yeah, and it also includes the new phone system for the entire Cape. Towns that want to buy into this phone system, which is something like, all you have to do in any town is to just dial 4 digits, and you can connect with any office, any public office on Cape Cod, police department, town hall, whatever. And it's going to really help speed up and make easier. And it costs a lot less money. I know in Provincetown, they've already looked at what their savings would be if they buy into this phone system, and it's about $65,000 a year instead of paying the phone company for this. So there's huge savings coming down the road with some of these programs. That's it for me.
All right. We all set? Motion to adjourn?
Move to adjourn.
Second?
All those in favor? Aye. We are
Nestled in a classic New England setting amid 200-year-old elm trees and charming colonial homes, stately sea captains' homes, and charming Cape Cod salt boxes, Shoreway Acres is a graceful blend of Cape Cod's past and present. Shoreway Acres, proud sponsor of Falmouth Community Television.